So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this again is another battle that I went back a fair way in my backlog to get to just so that I didn't miss out on it entirely, because here we have a bit of a clan war going on between two of the clans that are on the various Reforged related Discord servers. We have ARM and we have RH, and so there's going to be a various mix of factions here as these two clans duke it out over the dry lake bed, of course, one of the most evenly balanced maps in the game, so it's going to come down to just pure manoeuvring and strategy here to decide who is going to win this. And we'll go through the blue team first of all, which is going to be the ARM clan, and is going to be Linden flanked by two of the Evil Men faction, starting off here with CJM, who's going to be playing as HARAD. He's got some Southron archers here on the front who are very basic. They should be, well, they are a little bit stronger than the Haradrim archers, a little bit less in number, but they should be a little bit better just all around. But obviously you do pay a little bit more for them as well, but it is also worth saying they're not exactly the last word in terms of archer quality. Harad really are not designed to go toe-to-toe with really heavily armoured factions at range for an awfully long time. They're much more comfortable being more aggressive, but it does still help to have some long-range support for that, in much the same way that it helps when you're on the attack in a siege. Then, just in behind, we have some Mahud Berserkers, so some very basic armour-piercing shock infantry with their big bone clubs there. Very useful. They're not overly expensive, but if you're up against a heavily armoured faction, then it can help to bring them because they are fairly numerous, and obviously if you charge in, that AP is going to be useful. But like most sort of, I'm going to call them Axemen, because that's technically what they are. Like most Axemen of this type, they don't have a lot of longevity, whether they get shot by arrows or whether they're in melee with their lower melee defense. They do tend to die off quite quickly, especially without support. So Harad, they do need to support them, otherwise they tend to die before they can lay down their full effectiveness. They do have some Haradrim spearmen backing them up as a bit of a meat shield, so they'll probably come forward as well. Obviously, very, very basic unit of Haradrim units this. The cheapest unit of infantry that you can field as Harad, I think the cheapest unit in general, actually. And yeah, they don't have a lot of killing power, but they do have a lot of numbers for the enemy to mulch their way through. So I will be interested to see how the Haradrim spearmen perform when acting as that meat shield for the Mahud Berserkers, and I think they are facing off against Gondor, so that is a heavily armoured faction that the Berserkers could be very useful against, but the spearmen are going to need to take some of the hits for the Berserkers if they're going to be as effective as they need to be. Just in behind, we have the Champions of Nafrat, so obviously an extremely effective unit of bodyguard tier shock infantry, armour piercing as well. The sort of thing that Gondor really does not enjoy facing off against. Obviously there's only 84 of them, so it is limited in scope what they're able to accomplish as a melee unit. But even so, Gondor really has nothing that can go toe-to-toe with them one-on-one in a melee fight. The Nimlothian Honour Guard, you know, the Wardens of the White Tower, and I think even the Vanguard of King Elisar would lose one-to-one to the Champions of Nafrat just because of their huge anti-armour bonuses. And obviously all of the Gondorian high-tier infantry is very much reliant on their armour. Then we also have the Trollmen, obviously, pretty much the little brothers to the Champions of Nafrat over there, and much like their bigger brothers, I should say, the Trollmen of Harad will be excellent against Gondor here. If they just sit in the middle of the line, they'll be able to mulch their way through the heavily armoured Gondorian corps all day long, especially alongside the Berserkers and hopefully covered by the Haradrim spearmen. And then down here, we also have some dismounted Serpent Guard, the unupgraded version, but even so, they'll actually still be pretty good in melee against Gondor. You know, their melee skill and their melee damage should actually mean that they should beat even fully upgraded Gondor infantry in melee, or at least run them close. The problem they may have is their armour and shield values are not as high as other units of line infantry, so the Gondorian archers could really take their toll on them. We have some Southron Lancers, a unit we don't actually get to see an awful lot of, the most basic unit of Haradrim shock cavalry, so again, they are fairly cheap, but they're also not exactly the last word in terms of quality in comparison to stuff like the Serpent Guard, but if you want to save a bit of money, they can be surprisingly effective, and honestly, cheap lancers like this is not the worst idea against a faction like Gondor, because obviously Gondor don't have the best ability to go toe-to-toe with enemy cavalry forces on horseback. Harad don't either, really, but Harad do have a lot of speed, and of course, even a unit of very low-end lancers like this, if they get a good charge off, they can still do huge amounts of damage quite quickly because they tend to have more horses in the unit, which of course means their mass can be pretty scary if they're used correctly. We also have some standard Serpent Guards, so obviously just the better version really. Very nice unit of Lancers, very quick as well, so Gondor probably won't be able to catch them. And of course, we have the Mumakil. Now the Mumakil, very risky in patch 0.97. To be honest with you, for the most part, I don't recommend the Mumakil, because the omnipresence really of javelins means Mumakil can be incredibly difficult to use. Most javelins now won't kill them in a single volley, you know, there's only a couple that can do that, but javelins are still the biggest weakness to Mumakil, and because every faction pretty much will bring some javelins against Harad, it's often very difficult to use the Mumakil properly. Hopefully we can see the Mumakil do some damage here, because they can be effective if they don't get stopped and shut down immediately by enemy skirmishers, and if they don't get caught by cav and pikes, but we'll see. Then, the player who sent me the battle replay, Arm Paladin, is going to be playing as Linden here in the middle, so the High Elves, we have some 4 Linden archers. They're actually facing off against Imladris as well, so both of the High Elven factions are going to be going hammer and tongs at one another today. Both the 4 Linden archers will be opening up on Imladris immediately. Again, neither Imladris nor Linden are most at home in a prolonged skirmish fight. Imladris probably slightly more so if they brought one of their heavier archers. But even so, it's not really where either faction have got their full effectiveness. Linden do have a very nasty looking phalanx, a combination actually of 4 Linden pikemen and Mithlon pikemen, so pretty much a full pike phalanx here, which is interesting. It will be enough to make sure that Imladris can't just barge right through the middle of their army. And you know, the elves generally don't mass push either, so they do have that going in for them, but obviously this does mean that if Imladris do get their archers into a position where they can shoot the infantry line, it's going to be pretty grisly for Linden, because they've got no shields whatsoever on the front line. They do have some shields just in behind the Mithlon Marines, of course. The Javelin's very, very useful tool that Linden can use. Probably the best tool they have against Imladris, because Imladris are probably slightly the stronger when it comes to just their outright melee prowess. But Linden do have the Javelins, which of course can be a huge boon. The Mithlon Marines, when they're out of ammo, can also make for decent makeshift line infantry, which may be necessary against Imladris. Back here we have the Noldorin Guard, a fantastic unit of line infantry. Definitely one that can withstand most of what Imladris can throw at Linden. They are going to be limited in number, but they're also going to be very important here on the front line. I've noticed them break quite a lot in patch 0.97. I'm not sure why, because their morale values are high and they're an inspiration unit, but I guess it's just the nature of how armies can quickly fall apart if you don't look after them properly. The Noldorin Blade Masters, of course, the General's Bodyguard tier heavy swordsman for Linden. Probably the strongest heavy swordsman in the game still. It's very close run thing between them and a couple of others, but I would say they're still slightly stronger than the Pharazim Swordmasters, even with those shields on the Numenor units back. We also have some Harlinden Riders on either side, so the Horse Archers. They and the Imladris Horse Archers are both Spear Cav in melee, I believe, so that means they do have anti-cav bonuses, so they can cancel one another out, but it depends on what Imladris have brought. The Horse Archers could be really useful, but they could also be a bit of a waste. And then, of course, the mighty Horse Lords of Ulmo. Very, very strong knights. I think they're actually stronger in melee and off, well, not for the charge, but overall at dealing with enemy cavalry, I think they are actually stronger than the Gwaithri Rockdor, but obviously where they fall down is the fact they have significantly lighter armour and no shields, so after a period of time, archers can really start to take their toll on them. But again, Imladris not necessarily the biggest archer faction, so we shall see how that pans out. And then finally, the other evil men vassals that Linden seems to have picked up are going to be Rudauer, played by Waffles. He's got some Dunman Hunters, so some very cheap archers on the front line. Just in behind, he has also gone for just the full pike experience with the Franadine Pikemen and the Dunman Pikemen on the front. The Franadine do have shields, which is something, but again, it's kind of interesting to see no supporting units in and amongst this phalanx. They're going to be going up against Erebor as well, who probably could mass push into it if they really wanted to. The Ettenmoors Troll Hunters will be useful for their javelins. Spears in melee though, so maybe not the best against the dwarves in melee, but they'll need to use their javelins first anyway. Dunman Spears back here. Witchrealm Enslavers will be fantastic in melee against the dwarves, but again, there's only so many of them. The Franadine Nobles will also be a good unit. The Erebor Cav could be a bit of a factor in this battle, we shall see. And then also a side cavalry force of the Coldfell Maidens, so obviously some more javelin cavalry. For Rudauer here, the javelins and any axe throwers they have, which I'm sure they do because that's far too small of an army to encompass all of that. Yeah, they've got some Rudauer axemen and Ferodrum javelins in there, so lots of nice AP, which will be useful against the first of the red team armies, which is going to be Erebor, played by Captain Gervais. He has got a more traditional phalanx on the front line made up of Ironfoot Pikes and a supporting unit of Ironfoot Warriors. So it's certainly, like I've said before, Erebor personally my least favourite faction in the game at the moment, just because I don't like, I feel like they're too, their playstyle is just not agreeable to me. I mean, they're not overpowered by any means, I'm just not the biggest fan of them. They have the Ironfoot crossbows here, which of course will be a real problem for Rudauer if they march forward into Erebor, but of course Rudauer can use the terrain to their advantage here. They've got that hill going for them. The Blacklock Engineers, this is another reason why I'm not the biggest fan of Erebor, because if you can get them into a good position in any battle, Erebor is pretty much an instant win button for Erebor because of how powerful they can be. And also they're not as easy to shut down as something like the Witchers. you know, or even the demons of the desert really, with how unshielded and unarmoured they are. But still, it does represent a pretty big money sink, so we'll see how Erebor do there. Got some Ironfoot Wargoat chariots over here as well. Rudara should be able to shut them down easily enough with their javelins. But they do need to be careful, because if they start running through the line, they could cause havoc in the Rudara ranks. Ironfoot warriors back here, some axe throwers. They could be really useful against the pike heavy army that Rudara have brought. Got some Erebor legionaries back here as well for some more quality, which should be enough to give them an advantage over most of what Rudara have in melee, especially a unit like this. The Dragon Slayers are a really strong unit of Dwarven infantry, very hard to deal with. Some more Ironfoot warriors at the back, a nice formation I have to say, with some Ironfoot spears, legionaries and more axe throwers at the back. So a nice formation. We'll see how Erebor do against the heavily AP and hidden focused army that Rudara brought. Then we have Tex Tudane, second RH players playing as Imladris. Again, Imladris, we haven't seen Imladris for a while, so I'm sure some people are pretty glad to see them once again. Got some Archers of Rivendell on the front line. They'll pretty much cancel out one another with the 4 Linden Archers, so it's kind of a moot engagement that. Just in behind them we have some Swords of Rivendell with the armour upgrade. They may struggle in this fight actually with that amount of pikes there, we shall see. Looks like a more quantity focused Imladris army actually, because we also have some Spears of Rivendell. In with them we have the Bruinen River Wards, as well as... Nope, just some Bruinen River Wards. So yeah, pretty big Imladris army, all things considered. They do have some quality, of course. They have upgraded Imladris Guardians all over the place, so they should be enough to definitely trade well with the more advanced units that Linden have brought. Back here we have the mighty Gwaith Myrdain. Not the General's Bodyguard, but the AP will actually be useful against the Noldorin Guard and the Noldorin Blade Masters. The Blade Masters, with their melee defense, would probably still beat the Gwaith Myrdain in a straight-up fight, but Imladris don't really need to make it a straight-up fight. They have enough numbers here to really swamp over Linden if they decide to. Some Riders of the Bruinen, so a unit of Horse Archers, and then finally, obviously, a unit of Knights in the Gwaith Rokdor. But I think Linden actually do have a bit of an advantage with the compositions here, because all of those pikes, I mean, Imladris, as per usual, really don't have a huge amount of archers, which I think is right, but they've also gone quantity heavy. I'm not sure whether that's going to be enough here against that kind of Linden army. And then finally we have Zero, who's going to be playing as Gondor. He's got some fully upgraded Gondor archers on the front, so certainly from a skirmish fight perspective, like, Gondor are always going to have the advantage over HARAD, so HARAD are probably going to need to be maybe a little bit more aggressive than many players are comfortable with being. Some fully upgraded veterans of Osgiliath as well, so yeah, definitely Gondor are going to be very comfortable at long range. Even some marksmen of Kaer Andros on both sides as well, I think, yes. So a massive amount of archers, which could be a bit of a problem actually, because if HARAD are really aggressive, I don't think Gondor will have enough infantry to hold their lines. Nimlothian Honor Guard, they do have some fully upgraded Gondor spears, some Raven Helms, a couple of units of Pelagia Marines here and there, which are going to be extremely important for shutting down the Mumakil, as the Fountain Guard could be as well, because they have a massive anti-cavalry bonus as well. And that's pretty much it. There's some Gondor infantry mixed in here as well, and there is actually a unit of cavalry. There is the Mithrandir's retinue, which could be a problem for HARAD. Obviously, HARAD only have lances as well, and the Mithrandir's retinue are of higher quality than anything HARAD have on offer today. But HARAD still need to be the aggressors here, I think, with this kind of competition. But without further ado, let's begin. Very interesting fight in the making here, I think, because every section of the battlefield is going to need to go about their business a little bit differently, I think. Over here in the middle, I think both sides are going to size up the situation and think, we can't really afford to be the aggressors here, so we should just wait, try and pick away at one another, and maybe hope that on the flanks someone can start making some moves toward victory. I think certainly from an Imladris perspective, because they can't really charge into all those pikes, so they may want to actually support their allies, and that might be what they're doing here. The Riders of the Bruinen are heading over. The Serpent's Fangs revealing themselves, however. The hidden unit, and now the Poison Arrows are coming in. The Riders of the Bruinen are decently armoured, of course. They don't have the armour upgrade, but Imladris' units tend to be tankier than most of the other elves. You can see over here as well, the Ironfoot Wargoat chariots are moving in, but this is a very risky manoeuvre. The Coldfell Maidens are right over here, and if they do move forward, the Coldfell Maidens could do massive damage to these heavy dwarven chariots. And that is absolutely the last thing the dwarves want to suffer, because this is a big investment for the dwarves. These chariots can be extremely effective, but they're also very expensive. And Waffles really should be noticing these chariots. Like, you can chase them off pretty easily with the Coldfell Maidens. He could get kited, but he can't really afford to just sit here and get shot. But he is going to come forward now as those dwarven crossbows start to rain in. Actually, he's just going to hide behind the cliffs here. So maybe not wanting to get kited, he's just going to use the glyphs for cover. But you can see there those dwarven bolts are very effective. There may not be many of them, but each one is pretty much a guaranteed kill when it hits. You can see over here, Lyndon just manoeuvring into position. Lyndon probably don't want to get involved with Erebor from a ranged perspective. Like the Harlinden Riders, I mean, they could outrange stuff like the Blacklock Engineers, but all it takes is one volley for the Blacklocks to do grievous damage right through the entire unit. May not be worth it. See here the 4 Lyndon Archers still skirmishing with the Archers of Rivendell. 80 and 100. Yeah, I mean, Lyndon are having the better end of this skirmish fight so far, and I feel as though that's partially because they're stretched out in a, they're much better positioned. Like these Archers of Rivendell here, they were in loose formation, but they're still too bunched up. The Lyndon forces were much wider, so it's much more difficult to score decent hits on them. So the Archers of Rivendell are losing this skirmish fight pretty handily, which is bad for the red team, I think. Because it does mean that Imladris are at a pretty significant disadvantage. Imladris needed to win that skirmish fight, really, if they were going to be the ones to put pressure on Lyndon. As it is, it's going to be the other way around. HARAD are still pretty stationary against Gondor. Again, not wanting to get involved with those Gondorian archers. And charging across the field could be costly, because there's so many Gondorian archers that they could take a lot of losses on the approach. So I can see why HARAD is being cautious. But if you're going to do this, I think you should probably try to support your allies, so maybe sending the Serpent's Fangs over actually to try and bombard the Imladris position alongside Lyndon might not be the worst idea, because the Serpent's Fangs are not going to be all that useful against the Gondorians, I don't think. You do need to be careful, however, of the Gondorian cavalry. Still, very touchy-feely sort of engagement so far. The dwarves clearly not wanting to move forward, clearly fancying their position. If Rudauer do charge over the hill, they fancy their ability to just sort of spray them down with their crossbow fire. Need to be careful here though, the Dunman Hunters are moving forward. And Rudauer should be able to outrange the dwarves, even with a unit as basic as this. They won't get many kills, but they can at least poke and prod at the dwarves and try and get some sort of response from them. But I think Rudauer in particular are doing the right thing here by not just charging into the dwarves. The dwarven defense is pretty well prepared. You've got axe throwers and crossbows. It's a lot of damage to take very quickly. While, what is this? This is a little bit suicidal, I think, from Text 2 Dame. I mean, he's sending forward all of these Swords of Rivendell, a single unit, armour upgraded, shields pointing towards the enemy. But they're taking a lot of damage here. The archers are going to shoot them on the approach. It is going to force the 4 Lyndon archers to go back, but the Harlinden riders can start shooting immediately as well, the horse archers, without any fear of reprisal. And of course, this is going to lead to the Swords of Rivendell slowly but surely getting worn down. I mean, this could absorb quite a lot of the Lyndon ammunition, but it's not really all that worth it. I mean, these Swords of Rivendell would be needed in a full push. If Imladris were going to be the aggressors, they'd need all of their numbers to go around the Lyndon phalanx and tie up stuff like the Mithlon Marines, hopefully not getting charged by the Horse Lords of Ulmo while they do so. The Noldorin Guard are going to hunt them down. Now, the Noldorin Guard could be getting in range here of the Archers of Rivendell, but with their heavy armour and decent shields, they won't be too concerned about that. The Swords of Rivendell immediately going to retreat. Of course, now with their backs turned to the Archers of Rivendell, the Noldorin Guard could take a couple of losses to the Archers of Rivendell, but for the most part I would say Imladris definitely came out of that engagement slightly the worse. Again, it's not a crippling blow here, but the precedent is being set early on in this fight, I think, for Imladris to slowly have their manpower taken away from them over the course of a long engagement, and by the time they're ready to fully commit, they don't have enough left to really turn the screw. We'll see if that turns out to be true. Still, Granadine Rangers shooting away. They are going after the Blacklock Engineers. They could probably get away with just moving a little bit further forwards to be on top of the hill so they can try and shoot through the Blacklock Engineers to some extent. Problem, of course, is here, the Blacklock Engineers, they're multiple HP, heavily armoured, got a shield value. It's one of the reasons why I personally think the Blacklock Engineers are stronger than a unit like the Witchers. The Witchers can do more damage in a sort of shorter period of time, sure, but they're easy to shut down. There are a few of them, easy to kill with archers, more or less. Blacklock Engineers, that is certainly not the case. And so Captain Gervais is going to be not too concerned that his unit is taking range fire, especially not from Granadine Rangers. Like, this is ammunition which could be used later on to shoot right through a dwarven position, in much the same way the Blacklock Engineers will hope to. But that is not going to be the case. I don't think if they use up all their ammunition on the black blocks. Different story if they used all the Dunman Hunters ammunition, because of course that's not terribly important and it could take away the hit points. But as it is, very, very slow engagement thus far. HARAD are moving forward now. Gondor completely stationary in their position. HARAD need to be careful here, CJM, because he's moving up his berserkers on the front. If they get in range of any of the Gondor archers, they're going to be taken to pieces very quickly. Very low armor values, no shields at all. Southron archers are going to be moving forward. Yeah, HARAD, they can't afford to fall into the trap that many newer players do of just sending your archers forward and getting involved in a skirmish fight. Not with Gondor. It's going to go incredibly poorly for them if they do that. Which would be a shame, because so far the blue team probably has had the better end of the very minor engagements that have happened thus far, because I do think that Lyndon have done a very good job actually against Imladris so far. Imladris have pretty much had their entire skirmish line taken away from them. They've had one of their infantry units damaged, whereas Lyndon really haven't had much of that in response to them. They've lost some of their own archers of course, but not to the same extent. Riders of the Bruinen getting ready, and of course HARAD need to be careful, because if HARAD get too far ahead of Lyndon, Imladris could send over some support to Gondor and it could be very, very messy indeed. Septon's Fangs are actually firing away. Gondor archers are going to move forward. They are going to fire away here though, the Imladris horse archers, try and get some damage into the Haradrim positions. Gondor though, it looks almost as if they are going to make a little bit of a mistake as well. They're just sending forward a single unit of archers. What Gondor should be doing is just moving up all of their archers. All of their archers in range, putting real pressure on the Haradrim skirmishers, because if they did that, the Southron archers would absolutely crumble under the pressure of the Gondorian archers, and then you can just move forward and start taking pot shots at their infantry, and you're then dictating the pace of the engagement. As it is, what Gondor may end up doing is just sort of slowly burning away at their own ammunition supply. Of course, it's still not the worst thing in the world for Gondor, because they're still going to be winning these skirmish engagements against HARAD, but they're going to be losing more men than maybe they need to. Imladris still sending forward individual units, but that's going to be it for those Swords of Rivendell. Finally, not fancying the fight anymore, so they're going to leave. See in the background there the Ironfoot Wargrove chariots moving over, so still this has all the makings of a fight where it's going to be sort of very nervy for quite a while, and then at some point everyone's going to slam together all at once and everything will be decided quite quickly, I imagine. Still the Gondorians over here just staying in position, staying disciplined. Marksman of Caer Andros now getting into position to assist as well. This is good. Like I said, I feel as though Gondor's best bet is to just really pile the pressure on HARAD quickly with all of these archers and trying to blitz down their skirmishers to the point where they're going to be really, really undermanned. Like into all of these Southron archers. It's not going to take very long here with .97's changes to cheaper archers for the Southron archers to really start to lose their manpower to stuff like Marksman of Caer Andros and Veterans of Osgiliath. Even the fully upgraded Gondor archers would be able to fairly comfortably beat the Southron archers at range. Serpent's Fangs are an interesting little addition here. Again, there are only so many of them, however. I think they're trying to sort of take pot shots at Imladris. Or are they? Those shots missing wildly. I think they're trying to go after the Riders of the Bruinen here, who are actually trying to slowly chip away at HARAD skirmishers. Of course, this is good news for Lyndon, because they won't have to deal with this later on, and then they'll have absolutely no ranged threats to worry about, really. And then their own horse archers can move in and start putting pressure on Imladris. They could do really grievous damage, actually, to the Spears of Rivendell. Not the best units, I've said before, I'm not the biggest fan of them, but it's a lot of manpower for Imladris to start to lose without really being able to do anything about it. Now you can see the poison arrows being loosed. Some Swords of Rivendell that actually returned from routing, interestingly enough, right near the Gondorian ranks. They're immediately coming under fire now from the Haradrim archers. It shouldn't take too much to rout them again, especially not as the poison arrows collide with them. It should be enough to make them think about routing once more. Although no, Imladris' morale keeping them together quite nicely at the moment. More of Haradrim's arrows being technically wasted on a unit which would die very quickly in melee. Marksman of Caer Andros still firing away. Not really having the kind of effect they would have wanted to though, and I feel as though part of this is because they're only shooting with one archer unit at a time, so these Southron archers are able to get quite a lot of their arrows downrange, more than they really should be allowed to. And so far Harad can thank their lucky stars that Gondor has decided not to really leverage their archer power. Ironfoot spears over here, some Dunman spearmen just sort of blocking off this angle. Rudar still not eager to move into the dwarves. The dwarves have moved forward slightly. But Rudar need to hold their nerve here. What Rudar need to do is make the dwarves come over that hill. Make them be the ones to have to set up their crossbows, because if you move into an already set up Erebor line, you're in for a really bad time initially with the amount of damage that they can dish out. So Rudar just need to hold their nerve, get ready to move their pikes into a position over here so that they can block the dwarven advance, then make it really difficult for the crossbows to get into place, and then you can use the javelins to clear line of sight as they have the higher ground and really start to do some damage with stuff like the Ettenmore's Troll Hunters and the Reforged javelins. Harland and Riders thinking about moving forward, but maybe then thinking better of it. See the Riders of the Bruinen. Still have a bit of ammunition, I think, although they have pulled out their blades now, so perhaps not. Still a very grindy fight thus far as the Gondor archers open up, I believe, onto the Serpent's Fangs across the way. Harad definitely most at home in terms of their environment in the desert. Looks like they're out of ammo though, because they've now pulled out those big two-handed shotels. Southron archers still firing away, but again, the problem that the Harad archers will have as well in a skirmish fight is, even if they haven't been blitzed down by all of the Gondorian archers, all of the Gondorian skirmish line is so heavily armoured that the amount of damage the Southron archers kick out is not going to be enough to really bother them all that much. The wooden slats and wicker armour of the Haradrim really doesn't compare to the metal plate that the Gondorian army wears. Reloading now. Still continuing to trade volleys back and forth. What have we got here? Again, this very depleted force of archers and swords of Rivendell just marching into the jaws of their doom. This, however, is rather interesting, because these archers of Rivendell over here, there may have only be 19 of them, but without any shielded units on the front line, the Forlinden pikemen and the Mithlond pikemen are incredibly vulnerable to arrow fire. So Linden have to respond to these units, no matter how battered they may be. Forlinden archers trying to get in the way, and they may be out of ammunition here. Here you can see that the Rudauer force sending over the Coldfell Maidens toward the middle here. Mouldering Guard. Still a slow process. Harland and Riders starting to fire now. And they are going to be going after the Archers of Rivendell, and that should be enough to finish them off pretty quickly. Like, when they're unupgraded, especially, the Archers of Rivendell have some of the same weaknesses that the Linden Archers have. They even look very similar in terms of their dress. So the light blue, very simple leathers. 4 Linden Archers moving forward, charging into the Swords of Rivendell, the very depleted unit of them. Interesting to see actually if the 4 Linden Archers can defeat those Swords of Rivendell. I think they should be able to. I think the numbers discrepancy is simply too much, but this should be enough to finally swat away these insects that Imladris continues to send toward Linden's force. Meanwhile, there is a bit of movement over here. Ironfoot warriors threatening. I mean, still you can see that the terrain is the reason why Rudar and the dwarves are still not engaging with one another. Ironfoot spears are going to be moving forward now, and without the Coldfell Maidens nearby, they are free to do so pretty much. And I mean, it's only a unit of Dunman spearmen in the way. Dwarven infantry is easily going to be able to throw aside the militia of the evil men. Dunman spearmen not really up to much in melee. There could be hidden units back here though. I don't think there are though. A unit of javelins would be probably necessary to keep these Dunman holding this line, because obviously it is going to be spear versus spear, but it's a very different level of quality we're talking about here. The Ironfoot spears, very heavily armoured professional dwarven troops. The Rudau spearmen, very lightly armoured rabble from the north. Now what will Rudau do? Because they can't afford to peel off too much of their resources here. If they do, the dwarves will simply move over the hill and get themselves set and be able to bombard Rudau from on high. Meanwhile, Mahud Berserkers are coming forward now, but I mean, this is where conserving a bit of ammunition may come in handy for Gondor, because if they're wise, they won't bother going after the Harad archers here. They will just shoot down the Mahud Berserkers, take away some of that Harad AP. But Gondor's still holding their ground. Neither side is really eager to budge here at this point in the battle, but someone is going to have to make the first bold move at some point. I feel as though it's kind of on the blue team to do it as well. Like, I feel as though HARAD really should be rushing down Gondor. With a little bit of support from the Harland and Horse Archers, that's a winning combination, really, I think. The Horse Lords of Ulmo as well, because if they get into the Mithrandir's retinue, it's going to be real ugly. And also, I feel as though Lyndon have had the better end of these engagements over here, so with a better start, the blue team can probably get away more with being the aggressor. As it is, I think the red team are actually threatening to come forward more than anything else. I mean, they did a lot of damage there to the Dunman Spearmen. No fallen dwarves there, all of them dead evil men from the north. Still Rudauer locked in place. Here come the dwarves though, trying to sort of shift themselves around and trying to sort of avoid the hill here. And again, if I were the Dunman Hunters, like, maybe now is the time to try and start shooting at something, because I mean, if the dwarves get set and in position, they're going to be really no use at all. What are Rudauer going to do here? Are they going to try and retreat? They're definitely shifting around their army a little bit. The dwarves maybe being cautious, trying to sort of coax out all of these hidden units, and I mean, they have. There's a lot of Rudauer Axemen, Ferodrim Javelins as well, Haranadine Rangers. I mean, the dwarves have got the advantage when it comes to, like, crossbows and such. Here come Lyndon, though. Lyndon being the aggressors right through the middle, it would seem. Riders of the Bruinen and the Mithrandir's retinue charging in and destroying those 4 Lyndon archers. The Mumakil were thinking about moving over here as well, I think. The Mumakil are actually using their arrows first and foremost to do some damage to the Mithrandir's retinue. Lyndon now moving forwards, and I mean, to be fair, Imladris have got no archers anymore, so these pikes are pretty much free to move forward as they will. I'm actually quite surprised that there's still some sort of Rivendell putting up some resistance on the front line. That won't last too much longer now, of course, with all of the Lyndon pikes making their first moves towards Imladris, and this is probably where the battle is going to start to kick into high gear. We can see that Rudauer now actually just completely ignoring the dwarves, and they're going to be moving towards a combination of the Imladris and then the Dwarven Chariot. So the Riders of the Bruinen are coming in. The Coldfell Maidens getting caught, but I mean, there's so few Riders of the Bruinen here, and the Coldfell Maidens are spear, cav, and melee. Forward comes the Harland and Riders. They'll be able to try and do some damage with those bows of theirs. Yeah, I think now we can see the battle is truly kicking into high gear. The Mumakil starting to fire away at the Gwythi Rock Door. Forward come HARAD. This is exactly what HARAD need to do. They need to be fully aggressive with all of their units all at once, and it'll be interesting to see if Gondor can actually withstand this sort of pressure. Because, again, they have got a very archer-heavy build. I mean, the veterans of Osgiliath and the Marchmen of Caer Andros can look after themselves in melee, so that is a bit of a saving grace for Gondor. Most factions, I think, would be getting punished by this sort of build by now. But we'll see. I mean, also, a lot of it depends on how HARAD can organise their attack forwards. Haradrim Spearmen, Champions of Nafrat. The Champions of Nafrat are going to be difficult for Gondor to shut down, honestly. Unless they do it with, like, Pelagia Marines, or maybe pin them in place with Fountain Guard. Trollmen of Harad going to be moving forward as well, so that rush is underway. You can see now that Lyndon are moving ever further forwards as well. Imladris have got a layered defence, which is not going to work here. If this keeps up, you can see the Mithlon Marines pouring a bunch of fire into some of the stronger units in the Bruinen River Wars. And with all these pikes, Lyndon should be able to grind down Imladris' front line. Imladris coming over here as well. Harland and Riders retreating further away, as Rudauer are now making up the entirety of that flank. But this is where a bit of trouble could start to brew, as Rudauer gave up their position essentially. This is going to allow the dwarves to get set and to start to use their crossbows, the Blacklock Engineers in particular. Like, Rudauer chose this for themselves, and they tried to set up a nice front line here, a nice thick front line. You can't do that when the Blacklock Engineers are right there though. And so Waffles very much paying the price here for his decision to just try and be the flank to Lyndon's assault. Like, he needed, I think, to take the initiative against the dwarves as well. As it is, he's surrendered the initiative to them, and now he's just basically in full retreat still, and the further he retreats, the more it's going to become a problem for Lyndon. Having said that, the dwarves also need to get a shimmy on, because if they don't, their allies are going to be dead. Like, Imladris is getting crushed underfoot here, because, you know, their army composition wasn't really ideally suited to deal with this sort of thing. The Mumakil are starting to drop now, but Rudauer are also using all of their cavalry in support of Lyndon, so Imladris is getting double teamed. So as much as I was critical really of Rudauer surrendering the initiative to the dwarves. The dwarves haven't really taken that initiative. They haven't really done anything with it. They've been a bit slow. And Imladris are the ones ultimately paying the price here. Linden are going to be victorious. Harad, meanwhile, over on this side, are actually losing fairly handily to Gondor. So in the end, there are going to be a few pockets of the Harad resistance which are going to be able to do a lot of damage, I think. But I think Gondor are going to just about have what it takes to break this assault up. A lot of routing going on from Harad here, which is good. I mean, the red team needed this, because elsewhere on the battlefield things are not going their way. But yeah, I think Harad may be taking just a little bit too long. Their rush was a little... Well, it wasn't really a rush, but their assault was just a little bit too spread out. And Gondor able to utilise their archers and their strong front line able to hold out, and I think that's going to be enough to mean that Harad are going to lose that war of attrition. But Linden here have really done a number on Imladris. It wasn't a good composition for Imladris, I don't think. That was part of it. You know, part of the battle is obviously choosing an army, and it wasn't a good one to face Linden with at all in this situation, really. Against Linden is one area where I'd say Imladris are more justified in bringing an archer-heavy build. Meanwhile, Erebor need to win here against Rudour. I can see there the axe throwers throwing their payloads in there against Rudour Axemen and all of the pikes from Rudour. That should be a very good choice indeed. You can see that already the Rudour front line is looking like routing. Waffles' javelins are far too close to his own front line as well, so he's not going to be able to get good shots. Well, I mean, that's Imladris dead, but Linden are now going to have to reorganise themselves because they're going to have to deal with their allies losing on both flanks. Rudour are trying to hold back the dwarves, but you can see here the dwarves are just barging through the Rudour lines here. Not particularly good organisation from Rudour here, I have to be honest. And even with all this AP, they're not going to be able to do a lot of damage. And part of the problem here, Erebor being able to utilise their very powerful skirmish line, although for the most part it's the axe throwers here doing more of the damage. Rudour are in the back lines here, or they were anyway. The Coalfell Maidens getting chased off by the Ironfoot Wargoat chariots. The Franadine Nobles trying to do some damage there. Actually, destroying the Blacklocks is a worthy endeavour, I would say. But you can see here that, you know, Rudour might actually be losing worse than Harad. Harad may be able to stabilise some sort of situation over here, although I'm not sure. Not really. Looks like it's going to be a fairly hefty loss for Harad over here as well. The Mumakil dropping like flies in the background. Not a good sign for them. Trollmen are in the backfield, but they're sort of utterly overwhelmed and surrounded. Champions of Neferat and the Trollmen still fighting hard, but I mean, Gondor are going to have to work for this victory just because of the nature of facing units like the Trollmen. You don't get out of facing them unscathed. The Horse Lords of Ulmo and Harlinden Riders trying to offer some support to Harad now. Linden, they're coming over here, which I think is actually the better choice. The Dwarves may have been closer, but I think Harad, it's kind of on them to try and salvage a bit of a situation here, I think. Rudour just need to delay the Dwarves as best they can. I think the Witch Arm Slavers are in here, but again, they're just being overwhelmed through sheer numbers as Erebor continue to move forwards. Erebor Legionaries in there as well. Franadine Rangers charging into melee. The Ironfoot Crossbows pulling out to the flanks. And this is a situation where I can't really criticise Erebor for being a faction which I think is far too easy and comfortable to play, because in this case Rudour's setup was all wrong. Again, I'm not sure surrendering this sort of terrain area over here was the right thing to do at all. A bit of support for Linden was a good idea because they were able to kill Imladris so quickly following that Linden push forwards, but ultimately the way that he set up his infantry and just sort of moved back and gave the initiative to those Dwarven crossbows, Blacklocks and axe throwers, that's death, that is. Meanwhile, Noldor and Guard are in here. Nimlothi and Honor Guard are being overwhelmed now with all of these Linden forces. Like, you can see how significant the victory in the middle was with all of these Linden soldiers still alive. Gondor sort of trying to set up a line. I mean, I'm not sure Harad have got much left, but they do have something left, so Harad is still going to be able to give Linden a hand in trying to deal with the Gondorians. What have we got over here? Balance of forces is evenly matched. Well, the Serpent Guard doing a decent job here. Champions of Neferat, there's only 15 of them left. Oh no, don't crash. Please no. Don't know what that was all about. Horse Lords of Ulmo there. Serpent's Fangs are still alive. So again, HARAD, they don't have much left. They do have some units of quality, which Gondor is still trying to hack and slash their way through. And Gondor are going to lose this fight ultimately here now, I think. With Lyndon coming across, HARAD still being somewhat alive. I think they are going to finally be killed off. But the question is, can Rudau hold Erebor back long enough for this to happen? I mean, I'm not really sure they are. I mean, Rudau are sort of, again, at this point I think they are doing the right thing by sort of trying to layer their defence, making it as tricky as possible for Erebor to move forwards. But I mean, the problem they have is Dunman Spears, Dunman Hunters. These are units which are going to be very easily broken if it comes to that. Rudau can't afford to retreat too far, of course, because then that will just invite pressure onto Lyndon and HARAD. But yeah, the Dwarves looking pretty healthy, all things considered. They've still got a lot of their units left. The Dragon Slayers are still pretty much in perfect health, which is a scary thing in the late game. AP focus though. There goes the Gondorian General. Good tidings indeed, because that could be the beginning of the end for Gondor. Breaking their morale, and yeah, you can actually see here that they are getting utterly vanquished at this point. The morale is starting to collapse for Gondor. A big win for the blue team, because HARAD were going to lose that engagement for Gondor, but the support coming across. What have we got here? Coldfell Maidens charging in. Mithrandir's retinue sandwiched between spear cavalry and pikes. That's only going to end one way. Lyndon still looking very, very nice actually. And Gondor pretty much vanquished at this point. And HARAD still have some supporting units as well, so the blue team may very well have this going into the late game. Lyndon, eventually decisive action was taken, saving HARAD, and the Dwarves have not really done much wrong, but if I were to criticise the Dwarves here, it would be that then maybe they were a little slow on the uptake. I know the Dwarves are not exactly known for being the fastest faction around, but when Rudau were in the process of moving backwards, that should have been the green light for the Dwarves to go all in straight away, whereas I feel like they were a little bit slow. They tried to use their Blacklocks first and their crossbows, which is fine. But I do feel as though maybe they missed a bit of a trick here. Maybe needed to be a little bit faster. And I mean, at this point there's nothing left of Gondor to save, so it's going to be a straight shootout now between Erebor and Lyndon, with a little bit of HARAD supporting Lyndon. There's still a couple of Gondorians left fighting to the bitter end. The veterans of Osgiliath will not go quietly into that good night. There's a lot of pikes, and this sort of nothing but pikes on the front line has actually worked for Lyndon in this fight. It's risky though. Like if you're up against someone who's invested more heavily in their archers than you have as Lyndon with this sort of build, it's a decent build, don't get me wrong. If you feel as though the opponent is not going to go archer heavy against you, it's fantastic actually, based on the evidence of this fight. But if you were up against, say Lyndon were up against Gondor in this fight, this would have been a terrible build to bring against that, because they'd have easily been able to wear down the 4 Lyndon archers, and then they could have just skirmished the Lyndon pipeline to oblivion, and it would have been grisly. But as it is, that was not the case. Still some Lyndon cavalry running around. I mean, the Horse Lords of Ulmo are still 16 strong. Unit of knights in the late game, even as depleted as that, can be very, very useful indeed. So the Dwarves are going to be getting into position here. The Dwarves, I think, have the right to be the ones being a little bit more defensive here. Is this a bit of tactical geometry I see forming? Possibly. Still have the Dragon Slayers. They should still have some ammunition on stuff like their Ironfoot crossbows, which could be fairly key. But I think one of the things which Rudau did, in spite of being rolled pretty hard by the Dwarves, one of the things I think they were able to do was actually finish off the Blacklock. Well, no, they weren't. The Blacklocks are still here. They did damage to the Blacklocks at least, but they didn't kill them. But still, that's better than nothing. Like, Rudau, in the end, what their job was just to hold Erebor back long enough for Lyndon and HARAD to do the business against Gondor, and they did that, so can't complain too much. Coldfell Maidens and Franadine Nobles going around the edge, actually pursuing the chariot there. So Rudau is still a fixture in this fight. They still have that cav. I mean, again, 12 knights. Armour-piercing knights at that, so more ideally suited to fight the dwarves, perhaps. Finally getting caught, that chariot, and finally getting killed, more to the point. So, I mean, to be fair, Linden and Harad don't have the biggest army left either. Still some Trollmen of Harad there, very depleted champions of Neferat. Those Southron archers have their bows out still, so they still have some ammunition, I think. The unit of 16 does. That's not going to be enough, I think, for the dwarves to give up their position. They can absorb that kind of damage all day long. Most interesting. Quite a bit of cav as well from a Linden perspective. That might not be the best thing against the dwarves here. They had a decent amount of pikes and spears. Crossbows as well on the approach can do a lot of damage, especially against the slightly squishier cav that Linden traffic in. The dwarves also could seize the initiative here, actually, looking at these compositions. If they move forward with their crossbows, they could force the enemy to come towards them. Because, I mean, there's really nothing left from a range perspective from the enemy which is going to worry the crossbows too much. And just get just into range of them, mow them down, and if they decide to just sit there and take it, well, then that's on them, and they'll go on to lose this fight. In fact, I'm not entirely convinced Erebor aren't the favourites going into this particular engagement. Looking at the size of the two armies, Erebor certainly have more left than Linden, and Harad don't really have the numbers and support to make up that difference, I don't think. Ironfoot warriors, I mean, there's that cav. The cav is going to be important here, I suppose. It's going to be a short and sharp engagement moving into the late game here. Just having a look, actually. Yeah, I mean, the blue team have lost more. 80% of their army lost, 77% of the red team army lost. So it does go to show how comprehensive the Erebor victory over Rudal was. Very interesting chanting there. Hey, ho, ho. Some routing Haradrim Spearman. Karandros Marksman. It was a difficult fight early on for Imladris in particular. I feel kind of sorry for them because their composition really was not well designed to deal with what Linden had. Linden still had to execute, of course, and they did. Gondor as well, like, they initially started off well against Harad, but the support of Linden was always going to be too much for them to deal with. How much damage they were able to do to Harad and Linden may prove to be a pretty decisive factor in this battle moving into the late game, however, as both sides still thinking about what to do. It does look as though the dwarves are going to take the initiative again. If I were to criticise the dwarves for anything, as being, you know, maybe a little bit slower than they needed to be in this battle, like, they have the ranged advantage here. They could just move their crossbows in, loose a few volleys, and, you know, that will force Linden and Harad to do something. Southron archers on the front, I think they're just being used as cannon fodder to try and absorb some of that ammunition. Erebor getting into position. Those blacklocks could be so devastating here as well. Like, that could be a real problem for Linden in particular. A few well-placed blacklock shots right through the Linden pikemen, and they are in serious trouble. Noldorin Blade Masters and Noldorin Guard still in good shape, which is good, but is it going to be enough, I wonder? Very close going into this final stage here. Who will be victorious, ARM or RH? Make a prediction now. Because I'm honestly not sure, because I do feel as though it comes down to several factors which depend on the players. You can actually see here the dwarves, they're making a beeline for the hill here, which I think there's really no need for the dwarves to do this. Like, the dwarves, they could just set their crossbows up, and here, like, this could be the moment that the dwarves will lose this fight, because their army is now out of position, making a run for the hill, and here the cavalry, decisive action being taken. And, like, the crossbows are wide open, wide open. If Linden just continue to move forward, Linden, if they can just keep their courage, they need to keep charging. Here come the Horse Swords of Ulmo. That is unfortunate. That is very unfortunate they decided to back out of that. Harland Riders are coming in. That's only Ironfoot Warriors. Why would you back out of that charge? Comedy of errors here from both sides. Like, this was the opportunity. Like, Erebor's formation is all over the place because they decided to try and go for a hill, and the Linden cavalry had the opportunity there to do grievous damage to the crossbows, and they didn't take it. It was only Ironfoot Warriors coming forward. It wasn't if it was pikes or spears. Now the Blacklock Engineers are going to be doing their thing, shooting into the cav. And if it was the Blacklock Engineers they were scared of, they've taken the damage anyway, so yeah. I mean, if Linden do go on to lose this fight, that may very well be the reason. They had the opportunity to blow the Dwarven lines apart there, and they didn't take them. They lost their bottle. And as it is, I mean, I'm not sure. HARAD were also further ahead of the Linden forces, so it's a pretty broken advance here. HARAD getting to the front line before Linden did, and without that Linden support, the Dwarves are easily going to be able to hold. And now here come the axe throwers. The axe throwers are actually going for the Noldorin Blade Masters, which is not the worst idea, honestly, because they are unshielded. A lot of base damage, taking a huge amount of damage there, but Linden, it's too late. Like, you can't retreat now. You have to go all in. Even if you go on to lose, like, you can't be losing while showing the enemy your back. Come on. For how well Linden have done in this fight, pretty poor ending here, which could cost them the whole game, as Erebor just holding the line as the Dwarves do. Axe throwers doing the business. This is one of the reasons why axe throwers are a very effective unit now. A real phalanx buster, and against Linden's composition that's going to be ideal. HARAD's general finally falling. There, the Rudar cavalry also retreating. Noldorin Guard trying to get around to the flanks, but the Erebor legionaries should be there to block that particular advance. Yeah, this is a pretty rough engagement here for Linden. Erebor legionaries there. There's still the Harlanden Riders and the Horse Lords of Ulmo in the backfield, but I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to get the charges that are necessary. There are Ironfoot spears blocking that. Oh, well, Linden and HARAD are overlapping now. Ironfoot axe throwers charging into melee alongside the Dragon Slayers to try and shore up the line. Erebor may be running low on manpower here. The Horse Lords of Ulmo getting a charge into the back lines. Erebor, they need to shut down this cavalry fairly quickly, and they need to start doing some more damage, I think, to the Linden pikes, because now it may be that actually that the Erebor formation being out of position was enough to sort of tilt this battle in this direction, because they haven't really been able to get set here. They've done a lot of damage, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be enough in the long run here. The Noldorin Guard and the Noldorin Blade Masters hacking and slashing their way through Erebor legionaries, but it's the cavalry more than anything. The Linden Cav with some pretty decisive charges. The Blacklock Engineers are still alive, but now that the axe throwers are out of ammunition, these Linden pikes are able to just get set and slowly poke and prod at the dwarves. It's going to take them a while to kill all this dwarven infantry, to be fair, but these Ironfoot axe throwers, I'm not sure what they're doing. I think that's HARAD. So HARAD are gone, so it's now just a straight shootout between Linden and Erebor. These Ironfoot axe throwers were not in the right position either. Another example of Erebor's formation being pretty poor on this. So in the end, Linden pulling out of that charge was not as big a blunder as Erebor trying to be greedy and go for the hill. And it's good that Linden and HARAD were willing to take decisive action when they saw that happening and didn't just let it occur. All sorts of Ulmo charging in there, taking some damage, however, from the Ironfoot spears and pikes, but they're wavering now. Erebor's morale is starting to collapse as their lines start to collapse. Oh no, it must be Rudar left, because HARAD are still just about alive. A couple of units of Serpent Guard still here. Some Trollman, or one Trollman. 7 Serpent's Fangs are in here as well. These Ironfoot crossbows haven't really been able to get a good shot as well because of that awkward angle that they were in. There goes the Erebor General as well, which should be the final nail in the coffin. So yeah, I mean, Linden and HARAD pulling themselves out of the fire here, and they are going to be able to go on to seal victory here. And again, I think all of that is down to Erebor taking themselves out of a good formation. Like, they didn't need to go for the hill. All they needed to do was shift themselves forward, get the crossbows on the front, fire a few volleys in, get them behind a defensive line, throw some axe thrower volleys as the Linden forces advance, and they would have taken so much damage, Linden and HARAD, from doing that the Dwarven infantry would have been enough to clean up. As it is, though, they moved themselves out of position willingly, surrendered the initiative to the other team, and the other team took it. Maybe not as well as they could have. The Horse Lords of Ulmo and the Harlanden Riders could have damaged those crossbows beyond repair, but in the end that wasn't as big a problem as I feared it could have been there for a second, and in the end the dwarves, unable to deal with just the hordes of Linden pikemen, And this Linden pike build has proven to be pretty effective here against these foes. Even with those axe throwers doing grievous damage to it. Noldorin Blade Masters hounding the Ironfoot crossbows. Noldorin Guard actually losing to the Legionaries because of the numbers discrepancy there. Harajum Spear are breaking, but obviously that's not going to be enough to save Erebor here as Linden inexorably march towards victory. Shuffling their way into place there. A few more Mithlon pikemen, but it is close. I mean, there's not a huge amount of Linden's forces left. There's virtually none of Harad's. But just a few units of pikes. It is going to be within that magical 10% ratio. But in the end, Erebor, dealt with and arm, are going to be victorious in this particular clan war. These Erebor legionaries are going to be the last ones fighting, I think. A strong unit of infantry indeed, but it's not going to be enough against all of these pikes. Interesting fight though. I feel as though, you have to give the MVP here to Linden, really. They took the aggressive approach against Imladris when they felt the time was right, completely destroyed them with a bit of help from the Rudar cavalry, moved over to help Harad and turned that fight around against Gondor, and then marched back towards the middle and dealt with a fairly decent Erebor army as well. There goes the bearded elf. He died for his victory. But if one faction is not going to chain rout, it's going to be the elves. Still a few Harajum left as well. There's still some Southron archers actually in the background over there. 15. 3 Erebor legionaries, 15 Noldorin Guard. Is there anything else left? I don't think so. Unless something returns from routing. I don't believe that's going to be the case. Maybe wrong. Yep, that's going to be it. The Erebor legionaries destroyed. 9% the difference in the end. And as I said, Linden certainly the MVP there. Rudau had a bit of a torrid time against the dwarves, but at least managed to delay them enough to stop the advance. Harad, I feel as though if they were more aggressive against Gondor, this fight probably could have been even more in favour of the blue team than it was, but they still did their job. In the end, their support they offered to Linden was probably pretty key as well. Units like the Serpent Fangs and the Trollman, very helpful in the late game. Obviously Imladris, very difficult game for them, and I feel as though that mostly comes down to their composition. It just wasn't well suited to fight Linden here. Maybe some of Imladris' heavier archers would have been a better choice here. Noratino warriors in particular, with their little bit of added spice in melee, could have been very useful. Gondor did what they could, I suppose. Like, they were going to win against Harad, but then when Linden arrived, there was nothing they could do. Erebor maybe a little slow on the uptake, but they did very well against Rudauer. Very, very effective there, but ultimately going for that hill proved to be their demise. So let's have a look and see what did the damage for Linden. A couple of units their archers breaking 100 kills each because of the long engagement with the Imladris ones. Noldorin Guard doing very well. Horse Swords of Ulmo doing okay, but not necessarily the best. Their charges were key in the late game though. The pikes though, definitely the MVPs here for Linden, doing fantastically on the front line. The Mithlon Marines used all of their javelins quickly to help deal with Imladris quickly. The pikes though, very, very good indeed. Very well played from all the players. It's good to see a clan war here. A big thank you to Paladin for sending this battle in. It's always good to see something a little different. Like, I don't think I've shown a clan war in a long time actually. And obviously this is a fairly old replay, but I'm trying to sort of get through some of the ones that people really wanted me to show from earlier on in my backlog. As for the next one, there are a couple of the newer maps from the various map packs that have been released, which I'm going to show as well, which are going to be upcoming, as well as that Bursagath sort of alternate map that I've got going on. Obviously they're always really long though, so it's a matter of sort of finding a suitable day to actually record that on, but nonetheless I will endeavour to find that. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.